Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, welcome back to part 2 of our second look at the America map. And in part 1, we had just finished growing Odessa. And now we're taking a look at our remaining tasks, and we're way ahead of schedule. Right now we're heading into big-time city growth mode, because what we have to do now is grow 12 cities to 90,000. Odessa is over 50,000 already, thanks to the fact that we focused on it in part 1. But now we need to come up with really what I'm looking for are pairs of cities that I want to run in tandem, beer meat lines to start with, that can use pass-through warehouses. So I decided to just be consistent, and with one exception you'll see a little later, we're going to run pass-through warehouses and set them up multiple times. So if you're not clear on how to do that or how that works, this will be a good one for you, because you'll see it repeated. Let me think here. 1, 2, 3, 4. At least 4 times, I think, in this next section here. So you're going to see them till you get sick of them. In fact, we may fast forward through 1 or 2 just because they get repetitive. But anyway, we're looking to see where we want to start. So we go back to kind of our start, where we actually started, which was Atlanta. And if you watch the first video of this series, you know that I said we would probably build Atlanta, Charlotte. It's a natural place, beer meat. But because we ran that long line, that direct line to Washington, it's now made Atlanta, Charlotte a little clumsy, because that line's in the way. It's going to be a lot of messy crossovers and stuff. And so what I'm doing here actually, in fact, is looking at where do I want to do my growth. And I'm thinking about, I want to take advantage of the work that our computer opponents have done to build up their cities. So we've grown Washington a little bit with our Washington-Atlanta line, but you got Pittsburgh's grown some, Toledo's definitely grown some. And now I'm looking and saying, okay, well, what do I want to do if I do? I want to grab these computer opponents and get them out of the way, or what do I want to do with them? So I'm kind of looking to see who's up here. The one up here that seems to me is going to get in my way first is this orange guy. I think that's Doc. And so I'm looking to see, well, what do I really want to do? Where do I want to set up my 2-city cluster with my pass-through warehouse and take advantage? I can see right there Toledo is a nice one. I definitely want Toledo. So I think that orange guy is going to have to get out of our way. And what I'm looking at here right now is actually trying to decide if I want to keep his infrastructure or just liquidate it and build my own. And he's already got that line going over, so I just bought him out completely. You can see it wasn't the hardest thing in the world. And now I'm deciding, do I want to liquidate him? And I decide, no, I'm going to leave his infrastructure there, because he's got a station we can use in Washington. It'll already have maintenance. That's one nice thing when you buy out a competitor. They usually have maintenance on their stations. And by the way, while we're at it, have you noticed how much maintenance I've built so far in all this time that we've been playing? If your answer is 0, you got it right. We haven't built a single maintenance shed anywhere. Now, how in the world are we getting away with that? The reason is that because of the way the research works on this map, you go through these locomotives, and you have the opportunity to update your whole fleet. Again, I'm not sure that's the right word, but it's my word. Your whole fleet of locomotives in one fell swoop. So if you got all these locomotives that are suffering because they need maintenance, if you just to replace them all, now you got all brand new engines. So why spend all 80 grand a pop to put in maintenance, which then just slows down everything, because now all the maintenance occurs within your stations, when you can replace the entire fleet and have brand new trains that won't be breaking down for quite a while any more than just your normal random breakdowns. And lo and behold, that's what we've been doing. So we don't do maintenance. I'll give you a spoiler alert in the whole thing. In fact, our only maintenance will be the station we just bought from Doc there. So now the Magic Elixir of Growth, the museum. We've hit 60,000 in Odessa, so we can put in a museum. And now we're looking at where's our first little pair of cities going to be, and decided to go with Atlanta to Washington. As I said, Charlotte's going to be a little messy because we're going to have to jump over the line a lot. So we're going to build up Atlanta to Washington with a pass-through warehouse. And I'm just getting a feel for it. We just inherited that station there, and I'm trying to get a feel for where it's going and what it's going to do. And I realize I can just run it backwards and run it back down here to my pass-through warehouse and feed my Atlanta to Washington line. So we'll set up Atlanta to Washington wanted to do 5 goods, 5 resources, really couldn't find a reasonable way to do logs, so I just let that one go and ended up running 5 in here. And don't ask me, I'm kind of, obviously I'm talking about this after the fact. I don't know why I'm taking so long. Yes, I do too. One thing I would love for an enhancement to this is to make that Q and E, the rotating of the station or something you're putting down. I wish that was more sensitive so that it didn't do those big jumps, because it's really hard to get your track to line up properly. So that's what I was messing around with there. That's why it took so long to put that down. But now we're going to run a line. We'll make sure we got two tracks. And I think why don't we just walk through this one, and then the rest of them I'll kind of just tell you what happened, because it's really, honestly, it's kind of boring. To me, it's boring. I don't know, maybe some of you find it just absolutely fascinating. I don't know. But once you get the idea and figure out what you're trying to do, the actual doing of it is a little bit meh. But what I'm trying to do is come up with a clean way to get that line running to my warehouse from Washington into the warehouse, and then of course we'll have to turn around and do it on the other end. And we're deciding, I'd like to use 2 of the tracks in the warehouse, and what I've decided to do is actually to kind of go around all this, because we've got these stations here. In fact, I decided to get rid of one of them. And one of that wheat line is going to go away. And we're just going to get it so it's not blocking us. We're going to dump it, and that gives us more room to run our line through from Washington to the warehouse. And I hang on to that end of it just in case I need it. And I don't think I ever really used it. I could have deleted it. There I did. One important thing I did right there, I mean, it's a little thing, but I'm running from the middle 2 platforms in the warehouse. That way that kind of that upper platform, from the way we're looking at it, is free, so that I can then run that station that we just bought from Doc, where it's got, I think it's corn and sugar maybe, or whatever it is, whatever those 2 things are. We can run that into that top platform without having to cross over our Washington to the warehouse line. Yeah, vegetables and, well, I was way off. Vegetables and wheat. We can run that line in and hook it up to that open platform up there. So we'll just slowly and meticulously build this line. And one thing I've noticed about my own play, and you probably do the same thing, once I get this really rolling, where you're making money literally faster than you can spend it, I tend to just draw my lines out and take whatever the computer gives me. In other words, if I draw a line between two cities, a track, and string that track out, and it gives me a bridge or two or something, I just kind of, I hit OK and move on. The good news about that is you tend to get way less inclines that way because it tends to level out and make the most level route possible. The bad news is you spend some extra money, but I do, and I confess I get a little sloppy once I get so much money going, and we're almost there now. I mean, we're practically there at this point. One of the advantages of having this rapid expansion strategy with that phase 2 of the cattle and the beer, and then the pass through where you just get to the point where you're making money faster than you can spend it. And once I get to that point, I do tend to get a little less meticulous about my track building and just accept whatever comes up. And I guess the point being that early in the game, you need to be the opposite. You need to be mindful of saving those dollars. And if you'll recall, way back when this particular run through started, we did a line between Atlanta and Nashville, and I was very careful to wind it around a part of the mountain and run it through a valley, and then run it through a tunnel through the mountain at the least wide place so I could get the cheapest possible tunnel. That's because every dollar mattered when you first start out. Now, if I were going to run that same line, maybe at this point or a little later in play when my economy is really strong, I'd probably just run a straight line and I wouldn't care how big the tunnel was because I could afford it and it gives me a straight line. And at the end of the day, that's better because that straight line, particularly for your passengers, is faster and makes you more money. So, there's actually a justification for kind of being a spendthrift at that point. But early in the game, every penny counts. So now we're running our double line to hook up Atlanta to the warehouse. So now once we finish this, trains will be able to go Atlanta to the warehouse, to Washington, back to the warehouse, and that'll be their loop. And they'll just keep running that back and forth and hauling freight for us on and on and on. And honestly, I'm out of things to say. So I think what I'm going to do here is just fast forward this build until we get to something else that's a little more interesting. Okay, I take that back. Every time I try to fast forward, something happens. This is worthwhile. One thing you can do when you and this is a little, I actually bought him in advance, but when you buy out somebody, you're going to have a whole bunch of employees that he had queued up at your employment office begging for a job. It's a great opportunity to staff some of your trains with good people and get a bunch of bonuses. Well, what you want to do is as you start doing this and you're dealing with a bunch of them, the trick is pay attention to the names of your routes. So like here, Atlanta to Charlotte, that means that's a city-to-city route, and it's going to be a good place for an engineer, for a stoker, and a conductor. And you could put a security guard on there, but I tend not to because I want to save them for something else. So where I see city name to city name, like this one, Atlanta to Washington 1, then I'm going to grab engineers, stokers, and especially conductors. Definitely conductors because they increase your mail revenue. So that's one type. Then I want to figure out, you'll notice I'm not using any of my security guards, but I'm definitely hiring them. I want to make sure I don't lose them. In fact, I'm going to go out and hire them without putting them on anything, because where we really want them is on our city-to-city freight lines that are going through our pass-through warehouse, because then that's the point where we get paid. So we're going to hang on to those guys and assign them to this Atlanta, Washington freight line, and then they will really pay off because they will just be giving us a 5% bonus on always full loads. 16 grand, they'll give us $800 extra every trip that our train takes from Atlanta to Washington. They'll give us $800, and from Washington to Atlanta, they'll give us another $800. So they really are worthwhile. Now your engineers, your stokers, you want those on your longer lines generally because they help you with speed and with maintenance, so you have lower maintenance. But they are good, I think, particularly to reduce maintenance on your city-to-city freight, your pass-through line where you're doing your city growth, because obviously that's a high-traffic area, and any breakdowns really have a big impact. So you want to minimize breakdowns there as well. So anyway, that was our little dance of the employees. You can see we don't have any employees left to deal with. And we just kind of, like I said, we're hanging on to a few security guards, and they're going to end up on this Atlanta to Washington line. Or the other great place to put them, of course, would be on a direct line from a resource to a city. So if you had like a logging site that made deliveries directly to a city, or your wheat line that goes directly to your beer, the city with your beer, or your cattle line that goes directly to your city with the meat. That's a great place for your security guards, because they're going to get good action, they're going to get plenty of deliveries, and they're going to make you an extra $800 every delivery. All right, so now we've got our line set up, and now what we want to do is start bringing the goods into it. And I would definitely recommend that you get all your goods lined up and start pumping them into your warehouse before you worry about actually putting any trains on the city-to-city freight line that passes through the warehouse, because obviously it's only going to take a small amount of freight if you run it before you actually start loading the warehouse. But once you get that warehouse loaded with goods, it's going to start running full all the time and making you tons of money and really helping both the cities to grow. So now we're setting up the line with those veggies and wheat to come into our warehouse. So again, I'm going to stop here and kind of speed it up for a bit, and we'll wait for something a little more interesting to occur. Okay, now we've got our lines running in, our warehouse is starting to get goods in, and now it's time to set up our line between Atlanta, the warehouse, Washington, and there I goofed, I actually hit the farm, a lot going on there, and the warehouse. So it goes city, warehouse, other city, warehouse again. And I always do these with the same pattern. I do the left track that's available. I always do double tracks on each of the cities on the ends. I do the left track to the left track on the other end. So left to left on this one. And you make it freight only. So that's our first line. And we've still got some employees to deal with. So I'm going to put some of them on there, including, so I'm putting an engineer stoker. We'll not put a conductor, but we'll put a security guard. He's a good one. Now we're going to make our second line. Same deal. Atlanta to the warehouse, to Washington, to the warehouse. This one will be left track in Atlanta and freight only, and then right track in Washington. There we go. Good job. And give it a security guard. These are some of those guys we held off. And then we're going to do our third one. I always do these in sets of 4. And you've seen this before, but any of you that maybe haven't seen this method, I want you to see this. So we go right track in Atlanta and left track in Washington. Give it a train, give it a security guard. And we'll do our fourth one. Again, Atlanta, warehouse, Washington, warehouse. Now we're going to do right track Atlanta and right track in Washington. That way we're spreading out equally using our platforms on both ends. And we've got them in a straight order like that. So the next thing you can do, that's a long trip and 4 is not enough. So what we're going to do is copy them, and it's important you copy them like this. Grab the first one, copy it. Grab the second one, copy it. Grab the third one, copy it. Grab the fourth one, copy it. A little repetitive there, forgive me. But that way now I've got 8 trains. I know I've got them running in an order so that I've got a spread in my use of the right and left platforms on either end so that I'm going to get good throughput at both ends in the city, and I'm going to get good throughput through the warehouse because they're literally just going straight through it. They come in one end and go out the other end. So you tend to get very good movement of your locomotives that way. Now that one's good, and I can tell you that with just a little tweaking, we might have to watch it. We're now set. Atlanta and Washington will grow. They will grow like crazy, and they will easily hit our 90,000 mark. So now we're looking for our next 2, and we're going to go up here to new turf. We're going to go up here and play in New York and Portland. And I decided to do it just because we haven't touched it. It's kind of like virgin territory. But we have to be connected to it first, technically. So here I'm going to survive. I'm going to do that technical connection to our network by plugging a line that I'll never use. Basically, I'm creating a line that goes straight to New York from that raw materials up there. Now, New York is in my network, and we can go ahead and build. And that way, we'll be allowed to build our station out there in Portland. Had we not connected New York first, we couldn't go out and just pick any 2 cities we wanted and grab them. The first one you pick has to be connected. So now we're looking at where we're going to put our pass-through warehouse, and we're just going to do them as a straight pass-through warehouse. There won't be any city-to-city passenger or mail service. We're worried about city growth. So we're just going to build a pass-through warehouse just like we did for Atlanta and Charlotte. And here's a good example. You double track it in the city, and you do little switches so that you have the ability to use both stations. And we'll go back to the other end in New York, do the same thing. Set our signals and have that set so that we can use both stations on both ends. And the way I do it, I always put the towers right there on either end of the warehouse to catch them coming and going. But it really doesn't matter. You could put the warehouses over. You could put them in front of the station it doesn't matter. It depends on the length of your line, but that's just the way I do it, and it works. And it looks cool. So now we're going to expand that New York station so that we can have 2 free lines that we're going to line up. And I notice we're off a little bit here in our orientation, but that's okay. Now we got a nice, cool curving line going to our warehouse, and we'll continue the process. Double track, build the switches at the end so we can use both platforms. And you'll notice leaving the top ones free here because there's nothing going to be coming from, as we're looking at it from the right, from the East Coast, from the ocean. There's not going to be any goods coming in to the right, but there are things up to the left, up to the top that could potentially come directly into New York. So that's the basic idea of the warehouse. And again, if you're not familiar with it, the idea is like this one here. Once it's all set up and I have goods in the warehouse, a train will be in New York. It will grab whatever goods are being created in New York that can be used in Portland. It may or may not have a full load. If that's a full load, fine. It'll stop at the warehouse. It won't do anything. It'll keep going. It'll unload its full load in Portland. If it gets less than a full load, next stop will be the warehouse. It'll top itself off with goods that are in the warehouse that are needed in Portland. It'll go to Portland and deliver a full load, a full train, and then it will stop in Portland. It will load up with goods that are created in Portland, needed in New York, It'll go to the warehouse, top off with whatever resources are in the warehouse that are needed in New York, and always deliver a full load on the other end. So you're delivering full loads once this is rolling, full loads in both directions with every train you're running, making tons of money and moving goods, both manufactured goods and raw materials, into both of your cities at a terrific rate, so that both cities grow beautifully. And once it's set up, you can almost click it and forget it. The only thing you have to really watch is to come back and make sure that you've got the right industries, because sometimes the computer will throw some industry in there that will grow and you don't realize, oh, Portland's hit 40,000 and they put in a new industry and it's not what you wanted. It's an industry that's never going to get any resources, and that's going to hurt your growth. So to help your growth, you would go ahead and do that. The other thing is you want to have, as you can see right here, you want to have your wheat going directly into your beer city. And it can also go to your warehouse, but it needs to go directly into your beer city, ideally, so that that beer city, when it's picking up supplies, won't just keep loading more and more wheat. So you want to get enough wheat going directly in, because the beer industry really, the brewery really eats up the wheat. So you want to have that direct line. And then, of course, cattle would not be needed in the other city. So the city with the meat industry, you want to have a direct line of cattle going into that. And that's all part of our process anyway. If we truly followed our process, you would do your expansion, and then you would set up your cattle and wheat lines. But in this case, we ran out and grabbed two brand new places, so we're doing it all at once. We're doing our pass-through, and we're doing our cattle and our wheat lines at the same time. So this will go on, and once this is done, once we have all of our resources flowing into the cattle and wheat, and plus our resources flowing into our warehouse, we can almost set it and forget it, because now we know that New York and Portland are going to grow to 90,000 with no problems. So let's fast forward again and see what comes up next. Now, you may have noticed during that fast forward, I got some warning signs. I actually had to do a little troubleshooting for my Atlanta line. I had one merged that was messed up, and I had to go back and fix that. And that was okay. But here, I decided to skip that one for now, but as far as showing it to you. But this one's interesting. I did something here that I never do. Do you see that train right there? It won't move. I don't know why it won't move. It will not. It says it's going to the warehouse, yet it just sits there. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, I've run into a bug, I've got something wrong, something's gone crazy. So I actually removed the train, and I'm setting up the line again to run my fruit into the warehouse. So setting up to run full like I always would. The line looks good, the route looks good, the train's on it, give them a security guard, all the usual stuff, and we have it run. And off it goes. And I actually decided to do something I never do, which is do a ride-along to see if I can get some hint as to what in the world's going on. So I see here I'm coming up to a signal, and it's giving me the go. That's great. So here we go, we're riding along. I understand there are people who actually go out and build lines and do this for long periods of time. I think it would drive me nuts, but it is cool. I mean, I have to admit, it is cool. Look at that, we got a train over there heading over to Portland, and here we come up. And then I looked real closely here. Did you spot it? Did you see the problem? I actually hit the wrong button there. I paused, but did you notice that we stopped? Well, the problem was really weird. There are actually two signals right next to each other. You can't see them. Now you can see them when you get way down here. There are two signals right next to each other. And for whatever reason, with those signals, that first signal there that I just deleted was stopping this train. And I think at this point, I tried to delete it, but of course it's now being used by this train. So this other train is going to go by it. It's coming in from a different line. But now it's working. And it was all came down to deleting that extra signal. So now everything's working fine. My fruit line is working. It's able to merge, and all's well. But I thought that was interesting. Now, this next thing is an example of, remember I said that these two city clusters with the pass-through are very low maintenance. You almost don't have to watch them. You do have to watch the industry. So now there's a weaving industry, a textile industry in Washington. It needs cotton. We need to make sure it has a good supply of cotton, or it could stunt our growth. So that's the one thing you really have to watch once you get these things rocking and rolling and get a pretty good rock solid movement of resources into your warehouse and through to both cities. You just got to watch those industries. In fact, I try to control them and buy them myself whenever I can, either buy them or put them in originally myself when I see them at the right time. So what we're going to do here is run a line down to pick up cotton and bring it into Washington, and that way that new industry will be, rather than being a hindrance to us by potentially stunning our growth, now it's going to be a big benefit because it's going to create textiles, cloth, which will also be shipped down to Atlanta to help Atlanta grow. The cloth will also help Washington grow, and we'll make money on it, shipping it as well. So this is a big win for us, provided we make sure we get that cotton in there. If you don't put the cotton in there, it's a problem. With the cotton, it's a win in every way, every way we can think of. So anyway, this is just an example of how you have to kind of watch your cities, even after you have your two city cluster with your pass-through warehouse all set up. You still got to watch the industries and manage the industries in each of the cities and make sure that they are good industries that can help growth and that can be supplied with raw materials, as in the cotton here going to our textile industry. So now we're going to take advantage of our purchase of Doc Murphy again. Remember, we didn't liquidate his track and buildings, so he's got a station for us out there in Pittsburgh, and has already built a line out there. It's a single line, but we can double track it now rather cheaply and have a line going to Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh to Washington. And the good thing there is, over in Pittsburgh, one of the main reasons I did this was, over in Pittsburgh, they have a clothing industry, which of course needs textiles, which is the business that we just got through putting cotton into in Washington. So now that business in Washington will be able to sell to both Pittsburgh and to the clothing industry, which will really take it, and also to Atlanta, which just needs it, period. So that Washington business now has 3 customers, basically. Very good customer in Pittsburgh, a good customer in Washington in itself, in Washington, and a good customer in Atlanta. So we're going to be able to ship textiles all over the place and make good money on it. So we're making sure we make that connection. And here's something that's kind of cool. When you do, and I didn't even realize this is something I learned as I was doing this. You notice we've got a $125,000 refund for deleting some track and stuff. Well, that's was Doc Murphy's stuff that we deleted, and we got refunds. It's almost like you can pick and choose your refunds, which I did not know that. We'll have to look into that a little more to make sure that's really how that works. But it appears that if you don't liquidate, you can go out and liquidate the pieces you don't want, keep the pieces you do want. So that would be definitely something to keep in mind. I usually liquidate, just get rid of them, and most of the time I would recommend that. But sometimes they have like here, they went and made some tunnels, and I wouldn't have done the tunnels myself, but since they're there and they give us a nice straight line over to Pittsburgh from Washington, well, why not keep them? So now we're setting up our line there from Washington to Pittsburgh, and that's going to kind of wrap up this one. This is a good place to stop. We have, remember in our first episode, we did our original expansion. We moved all the way out to Odessa. We built up Odessa to make it the largest city on the map in population. And then in this one, we have set up two city clusters, Atlanta and Washington, and New York City and Portland, Maine. And those two will give us 4 of the cities that we need. And look at the size of Odessa now. It's 120,000 people. Did I read that correctly? And just going gangbusters. So we're looking really good here. So we got one of our 12, and now we just need to build enough 2 city clusters, or whatever mechanism we choose to use for city growth, to get to our 12. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.